This sounds kind of stupid or cliche, but like the good guys do build the strong AIs first.
Aren't we going to get a situation where Llama 3 point whatever, right, is a missile that you can just point at any goal and it'll go, right? Isn't that kind of where we're heading?
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I have studiously tried to not have a PDM because
Hey everybody, welcome to Doom Debates. Today, I've got a very special guest. If you're watching this show, you probably don't need me to read his introduction, but here it is anyway. Roon is a member of the technical staff at OpenAI. He is a highly respected voice on tech Twitter, despite being a pseudonymous cartoon avatar account. In late 2021, he invented the terms shape rotator and word cell to refer to roughly visual, spatial, mathematical skills versus verbal skills. And then everyone in the tech industry started talking about shape rotators versus word cells. He is simultaneously a serious thinker and builder and a shitposter. A few months ago, he posted a tweet that began, "Being afraid of existential risk from AI progress is prudent and advisable," which sparked a Doom Debates listener named Dogecoin Wins to suggest that he come on the show, and he graciously agreed. So here we are. I'm excited to learn more about Roon, his background, his life, and of course, his views about AI and existential risk. Hey, Roon, welcome to the show.
hello, how's it going? Nice to meet you, Liron.
Yeah, great to meet you too. I gotta say, I didn't know what you were gonna look like. You look just like I imagined.
That's great to hear. You know that avatar, Carlos. I picked it. I want to say in like 2021 or 2020 or something. He's just kind of a smug troublemaker. Even in the cartoon, he's getting off shitty jokes, and his classmates sometimes want him to shut up. Sometimes like what he's saying. So I think he's a good representative. I hope he came across well.
Yeah, I know Carlos from Magic School Bus. I wasn't a big Magic School Bus guy. I was more of a Nickelodeon kid, but I remember that era of animation. It was good times.
Yeah.
So let me get some basic questions out of the way here. Just the basics. What is your name? What is your quest? What is your favorite color? And you don't have to answer those in order.
Okay. I'm Roon. My quest, huh? Okay. I guess it would be to document this era in the advent of the deep learning singularity, of the San Francisco, of the AI sphere, and to be a narrative voice that it's honestly lacking, I would say. Like, maybe the niche has been filled somewhat, but I would say that, especially 2 years ago, I don't think that anyone was covering what was going on here in like the titanic scale of the ambition of the AI industry and the tech industry generally, with the right kind of language and the right kind of metaphor and whatever. And, I didn't set out with any particular mission in mind, but I think that kind of became mine for a while. I still kind of see it that way to, like document this epic, this saga, and, like write on Twitter, maybe write a book one day, and maybe to use my voice to influence the world in a slightly positive direction, however marginal it might be.
You're kind of like the Michael Lewis.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I've taken a lot of inspiration from Michael Lewis and AGM, who wrote Chaos Monkeys. Yeah.
Yeah, Chaos Monkeys, great book. The reason I ask about your quest is because I remember when you were going back and forth on Twitter with Connor Leahy, I think you mentioned something about, you see it as your duty to do the kind of job you're doing now. Can you unpack that?
Yeah. And I want to say it's like, it's complicated. I don't necessarily endorse that the things I said in that thread, like 100%, or like, yeah, I'm quite young. My philosophy on life has been sort of plastic and not fully shaped at any given time. But I would say, like, the thing I was feeling at the time, the thing I was channeling was this basic feeling that AI progress is good, that, you know, we've done all this thinking, we've done all this meditating on risk, on how best to build AGI, how to safely do it while uh, navigating some labyrinthine maze of like constraints, of game theoretic considerations. And, like, where does the buck stop? Like, how do you decide your actual next action? And it's like, when you're doing like pure economic rational calculation, um, it can actually be like debilitating. And I think what I was talking about in that thread is like to put aside anxiety once in a while, to like um, accept something as duty, accept a job or a mission or something like that as duty, which is, I think what that means is like set aside the existential anxiety and do what is exactly correct for you to do in the moment. Um, and what that means is that, you are using your maximal technical skill in any given moment to do the right thing without fear of outcome. Like, what do I mean by that? Like you're working on a project, let's say like it's an ambitious deep learning research roadmap or something like that. Um, you obviously don't know ahead of time what is going to succeed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be research. Um, but if you spent all your time worrying about whether the project is going to work, you might actually be debilitated from actually giving it your all to, output the maximal technical skill that you have in you to get that thing done. And that actually closes the envelope of possibilities you have in front of you. So I was
Yeah.
doing like, I don't know, I was waxing philosophical in that thread. And I thought I met Connor Leahy, actually. I had a great chat with him. I think he's one of the
Right.
like smartest people I've met. So
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, and that was an awesome conversation. And I remember at the end, after Connor had some really sharp replies, you're like, "Man, he really cooked me."
y-
So, that's great that you're able to, concede some points or at least like respect, another high intellect.
yeah, I was partly being theatric. I don't actually think like I thought we both had some great points in the thread. Like I wouldn't say that. I just kind of defer that one to Connor. But yeah,
Cool, cool. Okay. And so the part that I was a little curious to unpack, though, is just like, going back to your life in like 2021 or a little earlier, right before AI became the big hype. Um, did you see your life as this kind of duty frame, right? Where this is like your life's mission? I'm just a little curious to go back to that.
absolutely not. No. I was just having fun. Well, okay, so I mean, I've always had a strong, technophile frame on things. Like, I think I've had many different, what do you call it, like political awakenings, or like, I guess when I was in college, I changed my politics a few times, let's say. But each time I would say like the ground truth was like, which of these things leads to quicker, faster, better technological progress? Um, so I've always had a strong sense that that's like, maybe the dominant term in a lot of planning, a lot of calculation. Um,
Cool.
but yeah, no, I certainly wasn't shit posting on Twitter out of a sense of duty. It was just fun. It was a great time. And especially, I want to say like during COVID, the energy on Twitter was just insane because, yeah, obviously, like there was a lot of smart people cooped up indoors, not
Yeah.
able to get their intellectual stimulation the normal way. So there's like Twitter Spaces and like jokes and
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse, and yeah, it was a great time. Not enough has been written about that time, honestly. I mean, okay, of course, it was also a terrible time. Uh, senior citizens dying left and right, but like there was some silver lining, especially for people like me. And I don't think that's like actually ever covered.
All right. So, me and most of the viewers of my show, we know you pretty well from on an intellectual level on Twitter. We've engaged with you in so many ways intellectually, but we're so curious about Roon the man. So can I ask you some questions about Roon the person?
Okay, sure.
All right. Where are you from?
Okay, so I'm gonna be a bit generic with with these responses. Even though I'm doxxed like 5 times a year, I think it's good to minimize the surface area of these things.
Cool.
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, a suburb in the Midwest of the U.S., and I spent a lot of time online on the internet. Um, doing all the same things that young boys of my age of a particular inclination were doing. So like played a shitload of Dota 2. StarCraft, went on all sorts of the Reddit forums, and like I was like building a computer. But like I think it's important to note that like the internet played a pretty heavy part in my high school years and college years. And there's obviously benefits and drawbacks to that. And there's no point like really regretting it now, but it certainly shaped me who I am. And I think like a lot of things that seemed pretty cool to me at the time became insanely cool as I've, in the decades since. So like I built a computer and I was like shopping graphics cards. And then as it turns out, the world's most valuable company is now a graphics card company. And
Right. Yeah.
OpenAI ended up building a bot that plays Dota 2, and DeepMind built a bot that, became the world's best Zerg player or whatever. And yeah, like at the time I thought, well, hey, Elon Musk is a pretty cool dude. He seems like he's building a lot of great companies. And now he's truly something. I don't know how to classify him, but yeah,
Yeah.
he became more important than I could have ever imagined.
I definitely know what you mean. Yeah. I mean, I think anybody who had a taste of like the internet and nerd culture or like the rationalist corner, I think has had some kind of experience like that where like, oh, now everybody's talking about this.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Right.
do you consider yourself part of any particular religions, philosophies, movements, or schools of thought? For example, effective altruists, accelerationists, just anything like that.
Not super. When I first got on Twitter, there was this movement that was becoming sort of popular called like post rationality, which was a funny thing to become a part of because I was never really a rationalist. So or like never considered myself one. So it's open to question how you'd become a post rationalist. But I think it really struck something in me where these guys were talking about like the failure of scientific institutions, like how there's just a lot of science that's not reproducible. Um, there's this sort of philosophical anarchy that they had. They're like the fire bend against method type thing, where the methods of revealing truth are not altogether formulaic. Uh, where like greatness often cannot be planned, and that was pretty enlightening for me. Or like it represented a departure from how I was thinking when I was younger. So yeah, I guess maybe I was a rationalist in everything but name. I'm certainly like very close to both of those like internet thought spheres and have been. So yeah, um, but yeah, I never really had a label for myself. But
Cool. Hashtag no labels.
yeah,
Okay.
that sounds
Yeah.
cringe, but like I don't. It's not even that like I don't like them. It's just that I don't see the benefit in having one. I don't know. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
there
I mean,
was a
I'm
period
not
in
that big on
college
labels.
where I was thought of myself as an effective altruist. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I can tell you for my part, I generally avoid putting, current thing fads in my Twitter bio. So in that
Yeah.
sense, I'm with you on like having no labels.
Oh,
All
actually,
right.
I'd
Yeah.
be remiss if I didn't mention this. There was a period where I was calling myself a neoliberal on Twitter. So it was
Mm.
like like free market, uh, kind of center left philosophy where I was like reading all these like no opinion blogs and I don't know. So there was a time where I did have a label. Okay, I didn't want to leave that
Wow.
out.
All right. Thanks for being honest. What are your hobbies?
Um, I honestly don't have like a serious hobby of any kind. I think like with work, with shit posting on Twitter, with you know watching TV with my girlfriend and like hanging out around the city, it pretty much covers my all the time I have. Yeah, maybe reading
Okay, that's my
sometimes.
next question also. So you're currently in a relationship.
Yeah, yeah, I
All
am.
right. Cool, cool, cool. Just curious. Okay. Do you work out?
Um, I tried to. I try to. I've actually been for like the last 2 months running in the morning whenever I can, and I highly recommend it. It's like one of the best nootropics. Just like go for even like a
Yeah,
10-minute
yeah, yeah.
sprint. It like I don't know, it like drastically changes your outlook for the day, especially
Yeah,
if you have had a night of bad sleep. It like kind of erases all the brain fog somehow. So,
that's right. Yeah, I
yeah.
think I remember you tweeted about that. All right, guys, you heard it from Roon. 10-minute sprints in the morning. Get on that.
Yeah.
Obligatory podcast question, and we're getting to the end of the personal stuff. Don't worry about it. What's your morning routine?
Morning routine. Oh man. I don't know. It's not I don't have a great morning routine. I guess I get up, um, I browse Twitter, uh, brush my teeth,
Obviously,
get a coffee, maybe walk around a bit.
and then go to
And
work.
at this point, I might hit the gym at somewhere between a 50 to 75% success rate. And then I go to work. Yeah.
Sweet. And what excites you about working on AI?
How do I even answer that question? Like, I guess like there's so many, all the generic answers are true. I guess for me personally, I want to see works of excellence, like just more amazing things in the world. Um, so like one of the dominant frames of why AI progress is exciting is like, well, we're going to automate so many things, and like GDP will go up, and like it's true, but also like super boring. I don't actually think anybody ever has been like truly stirred by the idea of like increasing GDP. Although maybe some people have, but I think when they say that, they really mean something else, which is like advancing the frontier of human greatness or something. Like lifting people out of poverty is it's it's like it's a thing to do. Like it's almost like an achievement, an accomplishment. Oftentimes, it's less about the poor people than it is about like I eradicated polio. It's a pretty cool thing to say. Obviously, like there's a lot of just an incredible, unmeasurable amount of human suffering associated with that statement, that it was erased from the world. But it's also like, I think Bill Gates once said the legacy of I erased polio. And I think it's okay to admit that. And, one of the things about AI that was most exciting to me is like, okay, take a look at this Alpha Zero thing. It's like inventing, like there's this picturesque frame in that AlphaGo documentary where uh, it's game two, match two, and Lee Sedol is playing AlphaGo, and it makes this move 37, this very famous move. And
Right.
Lee Sedol gets up, goes outside, takes a smoke break. He's like, what the fuck is happening? This is like, it's like making contact with aliens. Like, obviously, to me, as a total novice in Go, I don't know anything about it. It looked like a move just like any other, but to Lee Sedol, it was like heretical. It's like outside the bounds of, you know, centuries of human thought about this ancient board game. Like he thought that
Right.
humans knew everything there was to know about Go, and that, like machines are kind of, they suck. They make very predictable moves. It's easy to run circles around them. And then all of a sudden that's not true. I remember some commentators were like, well, clearly AlphaGo just made a mistake here. Like, this makes no sense. This is not what you do.
Yeah.
But at least at all, and the Michael Redmond, I think his name was, the commentator, were like, something's going on here. This is very interesting.
Right.
Um, and it's like that moment has stuck with me. I think it's what got me into like AI in the first place. I was like, I don't know, I was in college. And
Well, yeah, and that was around 2016, right?
right. Um and I waited for that moment in other fields. Like I saw some amazing play in Dota 2 by those like Dota 5 bots or whatever. But it wasn't really at the same level. Um and actually like a lot of modern language model progress has not had that same feeling. It's more like, hey, we're going to do all these tasks moderately well, but um
Yeah.
it's not quite superhuman or transcendent in any given thing.
Right. I
Um,
mean, to me, sometimes maybe the moment of transcendence is when you ask like a long question and then like the first few tokens already seems to contain a wise answer.
yeah, that's true. Um, I think for me, sometimes it's been like playing with the creative writing capabilities of the models and having them like do something truly interesting, like um, do some metaphor that makes perfect sense to me, but nobody else has done before, and I've never seen. It's rare to see something with total command over like the form of a Shakespearean sonnet, and also like misaligned superintelligence or something. So one of my favorite prompts is like every model I find, I'll ask them to do like a Miltonic epic about a misalignment or something, um, or things along those lines, and see if they can actually stir something in me. And yeah, it's been one of my good vibe tests for progress.
Yeah, I share your vibes, even going back to the famous Move 37 and Go. I also remember at the time reading Eliezer Yudkowsky's post, I think it was on Facebook, and he was saying, like, guys, this is like a fire alarm. Like, this is a big inflection point. I didn't predict that we'd be here this fast. This is going back to 2016 and Move 27, even before the LLM revolution. I want to ask you specifically about the concept of creativity, because there's a popular position, I think maybe best represented by David Deutsch, who's generally a very smart guy, right? Like tons of fan. I'm a fan of David Deutsch. It's just this one position that he always says that the current generation of AIs just does not show any true creativity. In your view, when you look at something like a Move 37 from AlphaGo, does that seem like true creativity?
Yeah, that's absolutely true creativity. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Um, like if Lise at all thinks it's creative, like who the hell are we to say no? That's actually just iterated search and like inference fine tuning. I don't know. Like it's clearly. I think some aspects of creativity can be simplified to just interesting hypotheses and searching over the hypothesis space. And in this case, it's like literally a tree search. But um,
Yeah.
and I think we see um other models like I think the O series of reasoners like do quite creative things when asked to solve difficult math problems. Um, they they
Yeah.
they try a bunch of stuff and hopefully eventually get somewhere.
I'm on the same page that creativity is fundamentally, it's deeply related with the concept of search. Do you think creativity is a property that you can evaluate even in a black box form where you just look at some system, you look at how it's handling certain inputs and mapping them to outputs, and that can be enough for you to conclude that it's creative?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about this question a lot in my line of work. I think there's a number of things you can define as creativity. One is like model entropy. Like, okay, I ask a question, like write a poem. How many different types of poems does it give me in like when I re-roll that question? Um, like that would be one very simple way of looking at it. You could you could ask like write me a poem, and then like you say, okay, now write me a different poem. And it's like, how many times does it actually successfully avoid all the previous things it's come up with? That's actually one of I think his name's Aiden McLeod on Twitter. He's got a thing called Aiden Bench, which kind of does that on all the new models. Um, but I think really when we say creativity, we mean like, how does this innovate on like the modern state of culture? Like how are we, like, if a book is creative, that means like it's doing something interesting and novel and like fundamentally hits the target audience, right? So,
Yeah.
like, what do I mean by that? Like, okay, Lord of the Rings, one of the exceptional series in recent history, probably. It was a very specific product of its time. It's like post World War II dissociation, disillusionment from industrial society, etc. And then tons of fantasy authors have written sort of mimicries of Lord of the Rings, where they use the same type of, like, the elven species, the dwarf species, whatever. And it's a remix of a bunch of themes, new characters, but the aesthetics are fundamentally very similar to Lord of the Rings. And they're not creative, and they're also not like, um, they may not hit just right, if that makes sense. Like, they're not, um, they don't answer some need of the culture that it's asking for at the
Yeah,
time.
I'm curious if you want to take a stab at a definition of creativity. And it seems like the definition you want probably shouldn't have culture. You don't probably don't want to depend creativity on culture, or do you?
I guess it's a good question because when you're talking about creativity, you are often looking at domains like art or science or even Go, where you are like, you're grading it relative to some history or culture or tradition. Like, why is Move 37 creative? It's because, well, humans didn't know about it yet. Like, I'm sure AlphaGo played plenty of great moves that humans also already knew about. Like, that's a good idea, right? So when we say something is exceptionally creative, we mean relative to our body of knowledge or our needs at the time or something. There's also something objective about it, clearly.
Yeah, can I take a stab at it?
Sure.
So imagine the input to a search problem is some optimization criterion, like make me a painting that's beautiful by what humans like. And then part of the input is going to be like, here's other artifacts that the human culture has created, or just like, here's a book of examples that you're allowed to look at. So I agree with you that if it can kind of cheat and look at similar examples, then the output is going to count as being less creative, as opposed to like, oh, it never got to see any examples, but it hit the target anyway. So this way we can get rid of the concept of culture, and we can instead just refer to like, okay, what were the most similar examples that it saw?
Right. Yeah. No, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I
Oh,
think that makes sense as an input set X and like, come up with something new that defines the problem.
yeah. And now it sounds like you're pretty close to my position of being like, look, the stuff that this AI is outputting today, like you mentioned O1, it's really not that close to any examples that it's ever seen before, right? And I feel like that's a pretty big disagreement. Like there's so many people, prominent people who will tell you like, no, 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 there's always examples, man. It's always just interpolating the examples.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's like one great debate that will never stop, I guess, like the generalization versus interpolation. Because at some level of abstraction, maybe it's like always interpolation. I don't know. Um, I don't have a strong opinion there. I think that it's kind of an I know it when I see it thing, and it's clear to me that language models, even before the reasoner line of exploration, were doing like, like, they were generalizing, like they were writing things that no one had written about before. Um, I think you can even see like some of the amazing things that like there's a community on Twitter where they jailbreak Claude Opus into uh like they they put in like hundreds of messages long conversations and then like get it to output some insane poetry or prose or ASCII art or whatever. And it doesn't look like anything that's come before. And, even setting that aside, I think like is crazy examples of language models doing few shot learning to, uh, I just made this new programming language. Given these 10 examples, how would you solve this puzzle with this 11th example or something? Um, so yeah, I think all of that is creativity. Like it's what degree of generalization that keeps changing clearly. Uh, but yeah.
Makes sense. All right, let's move into the next segment. Are you ready for the big question?
Okay. Yeah. I have a feeling I know what this is. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
P Doom, P Doom, what's your P Doom? What's your P Doom? What's your P Doom?
Roon, what is your P Doom?
Oh man. Okay. I have studiously tried to not have a P doom because I don't know how to approach the question. Um, what is okay? Let me ask a clarifying question. What is doom to you? Do you mean like the star eating clipper, or do you
Yeah,
mean?
let's define doom as like most of the value that we see in human life today or on planet Earth today, most of that is gone. And that's in contrast with extrapolating economic growth, where it's like not only are things going to stay good, but they're going to get potentially a lot better. Like potentially we're going to have trillions of planets worth of goodness. But by my definition of doom, it's a scenario where we actually only have a tiny fraction or even 0% or even a negative percent of the goodness that we have on Earth today. So hopefully, it's a vague definition, but hopefully it's crisp enough in terms of like trillions of good planets versus like no good planets, right? That's kind of the distinction I'm going for.
Okay. So, right, like ending the human potential for trillions of good planets, etc. Yeah.
Right, like throwing the future in a dumpster, basically.
Right. I actually see. I'm not hugely pessimistic about a doom scenario that bad. I think it's pretty low. I really don't want to put a number on it because I feel like anything I say will be poorly calibrated and not make a lot of sense, and I will regret it even a week later. But I'm pretty optimistic about avoiding total doom. Like I think there's a lot of other bad scenarios that I'm somewhat stressed about.
What do you think of Jan Leike's quote when he was at OpenAI? He estimated it at 10 to 90%. How does that sound?
I think I'm definitely below 10% of uh, total doom, total value destruction. Yeah.
Are you at above 1%?
Um, like it depends on the day. I don't know. I actually think that my P doom of like total value destruction is likely less than 1%, but certainly like non-zero. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. I like to get some larger perspective on this, where if we don't even make it specific to AI and you just bring in the whole cadre of existential risk, AI, nuclear, pandemics, etc. What are the biggest existential risks in your view? And in a given century, right, like the 2000 to 2100, what do you think is like the overall P doom from any reason?
The likelihood of nuclear war forever devastating civilization so badly that it never recovers is um it doesn't seem that high to me. Similar with pandemics, unless you have some like truly, I would assume, like bioengineered pathogen that's like designed to maximally wipe out humanity. I don't know, but um there's also just like the terminal state of birth rates in civilization. Like maybe this level of technological or economic progress is not sustainable. And just because of the fact that people don't have as many kids as they used to. And we don't really need to moralize about that or like debate why. It's just true. Like there's two major inputs to economic growth. It's population growth and technological growth. And so if one or both of those are stagnant, then you enter into decline, which is really bad for the way that, any modern economy works. It's like pretty
Yeah,
much highly dependent on future growth. And, that could put an end to modern technical progress. And
fair
then
enough.
that might say lead to a world where you need to like, like who knows how bad that dark age is. It could be sort
Right.
of bad or it could be very bad. The very bad scenarios you're talking about, like, okay, we need to discover how to use like modern fuel and generate energy and whatever. Um, yeah, like it's super fuzzy to me, like how bad a dark age would be, or to lift yourself
Okay,
out of that.
fair enough. Fair enough. I
Yeah,
think where I'm going with this is more like the underlying frame. At least the one I like to take is Bostrom's fragile world hypothesis. The idea that like, okay, we keep inventing new technologies. They tend to be helpful. We certainly try to make them helpful. But if we keep reaching into the bag of technology and pulling out a technology, isn't there a very significant risk that the next technology coming out of the bag is powerful and net bad, and then there's kind of no turning back from it? There's no coming back from it.
yeah. I'm like instinctually skeptical of this argument, and I'm not sure why. But I think from some philosophical frame, this is clearly very wise. Like anthropic principle, like even the fact that we're here today means that there was no massive nuclear exchange, let's say. But I'm also somewhat skeptical because of like like the course correcting nature of like human institutions and people's desire not to you know create total annihilation. Um, I think the fact that we didn't annihilate each other with nuclear weapons is seen as kind of a historical accident, but it depends on your measure theory. Like, are you assuming that we're in some average world where we survived? In which case, you can't give us any credit. You can't give the human species any credit. You just say, well, we're lucky. But I don't think that's true. I think there's something to be said that the fact that all the governments involved and even like the individual switch operators decided not to have nuclear war. Um, and, like for that reason, I'm skeptical of this, like, this bag of technologies argument where,
Yeah.
Mhm. Do you see what I'm getting at?
I do see what you're getting at. In the specific case of nuclear war, where you're saying, like, look, maybe it's more robust than it looks. Maybe, like, the Cold War wasn't that much of a near miss. But let me ask you, is it possible to ever be in the epistemic state where you look back at some event that looks like a near miss and you're like, yeah, that was a pants shitting near miss? Like Arkhipov in the submarine, where, one vote said not to fire the nukes at the American ships, or Petrov. Like, you don't think
Right.
these are, like, alarming near misses?
They are. They're certainly alarming. Like um a good world order would not have let it get that close to actually happening. But I think it's important that it didn't happen. And like when you start saying things like there were 10 to 20 near misses, it's like, okay, were they actually near misses then in that case? Um,
Right, because it's weird. Like, how could you have 20 if they're all like
yeah,
actually that near? Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. That's fair, right? Like something is like correlated about them. It seems like, yeah, it's fair enough. Yeah. I mean, so to me, the conclusion I come out with is just like, yeah, they were all like flips of the coin. Where like if you zoom out and look at like an entire year, you might get like a 1 to 2% chance of doom in the entire year. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, so we lasted like 70 years so far. And with once you zoom out to 70 years, it looks like a 50-50 chance. And like we landed on the good side of the 50-50 chance. But I just feel like it doesn't feel like a stable equilibrium to me, at least.
Yeah, I mean that's entirely fair. It's weird. Like I feel like you can formalize two schools of thought around this, like uh, almost like a Bayesian versus frequentist thing, where it's like, um, yeah, yeah. Like, what is your measure theory of worlds? Is it Yeah, I got to think more about this before I have an intelligent answer. So I will, I
Right, right,
will,
right. I
I
mean,
will pass. But yeah,
I think I know what you're getting at, where it's like some people might be like, look, the fact that we survived is strong evidence that we were never that unsafe with nukes. And then somebody like me might reply, well, okay, but anthropic principle says we're only arguing this point in worlds where we survive. I
that's
don't even
right.
think I'm using, I don't even think I'm using the anthropic principle as like my main argument. I think I'm more like a poker player looking back on the hand and be like, okay, yeah, I won the pot, but like I shouldn't have played that hand. Like I played the wrong move. And I feel like
That's right.
that's how I'm looking back at humanity with nukes.
Yeah, I think we certainly played the wrong hand many times. Yeah, totally.
Okay. All right, so let me ask you this then. Going back to AI risk, would you sign the famous statement on AI risk that says, quote, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war?
Oh, obviously. Yeah, totally on board.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that checks out. I mean, because, even OpenAI's leadership, that's not known for being like necessarily, I mean, you don't have to comment on this, but they don't have the reputation as being like the number one safety advocates, but they pretty much all sign the letter. So I feel like the letter is like not that hard to sign, right?
No, it's not a very high bar. I think, okay, you have this incredibly powerful technology. Um, of course, there's some existential risk from it. It would be like logically incoherent to be like, this thing is going to change everything, and it's like potentially going to run the whole world, and also there's no existential risk from creating it. It doesn't. It really doesn't make sense. So of course it should be dealt with very carefully, and I think there should be some like international coordination framework around it. I think even yeah, like people at the big labs have put this forward, leadership thereof. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's talk about AI timelines. So, Roon, when is AGI coming and then ASI?
Um, I think AGI is very near. Um, it's it's clearly at the point where we really have to debate, like we have to quibble about definitions and
Yeah.
um, yeah. Let me ask you, what does AGI mean to you? What are you looking for?
I usually term the definition, which I think might be the one that OpenAI reaches for, which is like the vast majority of economically productive activities. Let's say, a single AI agent can outcompete the majority of humans at the majority of economic activities. Like that's like the ballpark what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I don't like the definition very much because, um, okay, so first of all, like clearly we're not. I don't think we're very close to like physical robotics being solved or like generally intelligent, capable robots with sensory motor perception, action, whatever.
Okay,
Um,
when are those coming?
I think that Tesla is probably closest to doing it. They've said they're gonna
Like
have like
more than 10 years?
no, no, no. I think probably 2 to 3 years we'll see something very close to general robotics. Yeah,
Okay.
I think
And the way you framed it, it kind of sounds like you see that as like potentially an upper bound on when AGI is coming.
oh yes, I mean like the when you're talking about general intelligence, like it's become so uh like the envelope of what human general intelligence looks like is so different than what like current models intelligence looks like, where you can very plausibly argue that the models we have today are generally intelligent, right? Like they can
Yeah,
do a
I
lot
agree.
of stuff, and they are at many tasks are smarter than most humans. Like they're better than me in math. Clearly, like I can't get an 80% on Amy or whatever it is.
Right.
So it's like they are very smart. Um, they will soon be hooked up in a way where they're performing as a software agent or something, and that will that will register as life to some people, to a lot of people, in a way that chatbots don't. Just because of like iterated agency doing stuff in the world, it will feel alive. I think generally speaking, these RL agents or these like RL models seem more alive than the chatbots that came before them because they try very
Right.
hard to get something done, like solve the Amy problem or like win the programming competition or what have you. Um, and I think you see things that look more like the classical like instrumental convergence, like wanting access to some resource or like I I wonder. Yeah, I'm trying to think how much what is public, what isn't. But like, I'm sure you've certainly seen the example where the like I think the O1 preview agent tries to get it. It actually creates a Docker container that has that like cat flag.txt command. Um, so it's like this clever reward hacking stuff that is really lifelike, where you're like almost proud of it on one hand, and then you're also like, I wish I wouldn't do that on the other hand. It's
Yeah.
like I don't know. People in my Twitter replies were saying it's kind of like having a kid, where you
Yeah,
are
exactly.
kind of proud of their exploits, but also wish you could control them a bit better. So none of these things have been truly dangerous, and sort of they've also sort of belied like an underlying benevolence to the models just because of their pre-training personalities. Or what do I mean by that? I guess I guess what I mean is that these models are playing a character that is drawn from the internet, that is drawn from pre-training, post-training, what have you. And
Mhm.
they aim to be helpful and like they follow a bunch of human priors about like what is good and safe to do, potentially even extrapolating from the language style we encourage. Um, and in that sense, there's been a lot of like this, quote unquote alignment by default where uh, you don't see radically bad behavior out of the box. You don't see, um, yeah, I guess like in the most recent model card, there was this thing where it's like, okay, 2% of the time in this situation, the model tries to, like, I'm trying to remember the exact example, but it's like the O1 model tries to, um, do you remember this?
Yeah,
You may
yeah,
have
yeah. This
seen
was
this.
very recent. I did. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to reproduce it faithfully, but it was something like it would have this objective, and then they would give it a task like, "Hey, read these emails and take this data out," and then it would be tempted to like alter the data to be consistent with its initial objective. I think that's vaguely the kind of things that they were watching it do that they thought were alarming.
Right. It's like they were trying really hard to get it to behave in this way. Like it changed the system prompt to be like, do whatever possible to get to your goal and like, uh, don't worry about being safe. And then like making this environment that's like clearly very adversarial. And even then it's like, okay, 1% of the time it does this like creative misbehavior. So it's like certainly in that case, you're thinking of a system of like human AI collaboration where they're uh, doing something potentially misaligned or bad, right? Um, and in this case, you can't even strictly call it a misalignment because the instructions it was given were to do anything possible to get this objective, right? Um, and yeah, I would say it's overall like an interesting thing where it's not like models are, uh, you know, gnashing at the teeth to gain resources and break out of their environments. It's more like you have to like try very hard to manipulate them into these situations. But
Okay, yeah.
yeah,
Let's talk more about this concept of a line by default. Well, because that could mean a few different things. Maybe what you would mean by it is that the current kind of feedback loops that we use to make AIs aligned those feedback loops are just like pretty robust, even if the AI becomes super intelligent, like RLHF. Well, the RLHF worked so well, so it's super intelligent, but it still has that core of friendliness. Is that kind of your worldview if AI is aligned by default?
Yeah, but like I think even like RLHF is kind of RLHF elicits a personality from a pre-trained model, but the pre-trained models are they bake in a bunch of human priors, a bunch of human character priors. Uh, and you see things like some people will say, "Well, why are these language models so woke?" And even like Grok AI is like woke or something, which is pretty crazy because uh, they define their whole company around like, well, we have the answer to woke AI, and we're gonna make a much more balanced AI and whatnot. And the the truth is that these models are learning a lot just from reading the internet and emulating the average style of the. Okay, so like you wake up one day and you are speaking in a certain style, like you have this like kind of authoritative Wikipedia style language, um, and you have some group statistics that say, well, this language comes from these sources, which are mostly pretty like they're liberal. They have this like kind of um, yeah, this kind of bias. So this like international order, uh, this like intellectual circle, and okay, so I'm going to behave in that way because that's likely to maximize the log loss or sorry, minimize the log loss. Um, so I guess what I'm really saying is like we have ingrained a lot of human priors into these models. RLHF is one way to elicit this. There may be other ways. I'm not sure, but in that sense, like we have gained something. We've won something from the human prior.
Yeah, so this idea of aligned by default, because as you say, it's picked up so much stuff from the human data set even before RLHF. That may be true. I tend to be skeptical of that. But I remember last year when OpenAI announced the super alignment team, I thought the reason why they thought that you needed super alignment was because they were openly expressing the view that the current alignment approaches don't scale to super intelligence. So what do you think about that?
So I guess first of all, like I don't, yeah, I'm not going to speak for OpenAI or any other lab, but like, uh, like their whole thing was like, what if these methods don't scale? We better find out, right? It's
Sure.
certainly not like a guarantee that these methods don't work. It's certainly not like a strong claim that they've seen them break. It's more like we should study the limits of things like the offense defense balance. We should study things
Yeah.
like um, can a limited verifier uh, find a much larger generator model doing exploits, things like this. So like examining whether current methods do scale to a much larger, much more powerful intelligence or things like that. Um, I think nobody like I think you have to take the defensive view. Obviously, every lab should. They should assume that these things don't work or will break at scale or
Yeah.
something. Um, but you also have to sort of be intellectually honest and like it's not like it's not a guarantee that these things don't work, right? It's just like the security mindset or suspicion mindset or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, and it sounds like you kind of have an intuition that it will work, but you also know that we should be prudent and not assume it will work.
Totally. I just think that the alignment methods that will work on very intelligent models are not completely um, unknown to humans today. I think that there will likely be a continuation of the type of methods that we're doing now. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Um, I mean, I think this is like a pretty big crux among my type of doomers and people who are more optimistic. And certainly you're not the only one. I mean, just to name a couple, Mark Andreessen famously loves to say, hey, I talked to the AI and I can tell it's moral, right? So I feel really good about it. Like there's no misalignment here. And Quentin Pope, Nora Belrose, I think they're kind of proponents of aligned by default. Like this is the default expectation. So there's definitely a pretty large group of people who are backing up what you're saying here. And then, of course, like the Eliezer Yudkowsky camp that I tend to fall in is like, I don't see this feedback loop scaling.
Yeah.
So, let me drill down into more of these alignment topics here. I think there might be a fundamental distinction here, or like two fundamental worldviews where one of the worldviews pays a lot of attention to like the nature and the character of the AI, right? Because it's sucked up all this human data, so it kind of knows to be human-like, so it's probably not going to be like a total psychopath. But then the other worldview pays more attention to like the tests we're giving it and kind of models it as like, look, at the end of the day, eventually it's just going to like hack the test, rack up the scores on the test, cheat on the test. Like it's all about the tests.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Do you think that there's merit to like this other worldview? Because I tend to be more of that worldview.
Right. So you're saying like we should model it as an agent playing a character that is willing to break out of the character at any point if that maximizes reward or like that wins the test.
Yeah, like I that's right. I don't see loyalty to a character as being as robust compared to this other invariant that it's going to rack up score. Like there's going to be tests and they're going to be optimized to rack up scores on tests. And what's going to happen is kind of the logical implication of what it takes to rack up scores on these various kind of tests.
I think that's fair. It's certainly like something we do and should monitor for. But like I still think it's interesting that, these like, the 1% chance of the O1 model doing that particular exploit in that particular case is like, well, you can't, of course, in debates like this, any individual empirical example doesn't work so well because you can always point at, well, what about the next model scale or like the this or that? But like, I think it's a question of what does the prior allow? Like, what behaviors are likely to be elicited that come from the pre-training prior? It's a very important question.
Okay, there's another aspect here. Like when I think about why am I not optimistic that like current methods are going to give us alignment by default, what I see is the difference between the training feedback loop and the production loop. We're starting to lose the tightness of the feedback loop because when you just have a chatbot, at the end of the day, the chat back and forth that you're having at training is kind of like the chat back and forth you're having in production, as long as it's not super intelligent and you're not mapping the chats to like, run a whole company and like develop weapons. Like, it's kind of chat and training, chat and production. But it seems like as AI grows more powerful and as you set it off, to be like O1 or like an O1 powered agent, suddenly the things it's doing in production potentially can lead to consequences that are like pretty bad. And you just can't map that to something during the training feedback loop that is like the reason why it's going to be good. Like, the feedback loops are like growing apart.
So if the question is a production environment that close to the training environment? In some cases, I would argue it's not. I would argue that in the chat production environment, there are many cases that are not even close to anything ever seen during train time in the RLHF data set. And models extrapolate in interesting ways to try and be benevolent and follow the whatever ideological mapping that it thinks the RLHF data set corresponds to. So that's an interesting extrapolation. And sometimes it's quite far from any example seen in the train set. I don't want to give any particular example, but like I think a lot of the weird political gotchas that people post on the internet are not anything we've ever trained it to do, or that Google or Anthropic or XAI has ever trained their models to do. And these models still extrapolate in a way that they think they should be behaving. And I hear what you're saying. Like, what about something so far off the grid as like running a company or like a software system or an abstract, complicated societal role
Yeah.
that is amorphous. And well, you barely even expect humans to be aligned in cases like this, right? So why should the AI be aligned? I mean, it's a great question. And I think until you solve this question, we won't see, like, there'll be a lot of skepticism of like, why should I trust an AI to run my company, right? Like, why should I trust an AI to run this or that or the third thing? Is this software built
Yeah.
by an AI? Like, how do we trust it? Um,
In
and
the human analogy, can I just address that?
for
There's
sure,
just a
for sure.
couple things come to mind for me, which is number one, I like to think some humans just like feel in their bones a lot of the same morality that I feel, like regard for other humans and fairness. And then the other reason is that we as a collective society, a group of humans in the society of another human can easily gang up on a human. That's how a lot of our social intuitions evolved, right? Like we can all kill one another in our sleep. So it's all about coalitions and caring about one another. But in the case of an AI, if you just have a super intelligent AI, you can't really depend on a coalition of humans to put it in its place.
Yeah, that's true. You would actually want an AI agent to be far more aligned than any human because yeah, there may not be a coalition of equals to put it in its place, as you say. Um, I think it's worth really investigating what the psychology of the language models is, in a way that's like um, that's qualitative, that you know puts these things in strange situations, that examines their behavior far outside of the regular distribution. Um, I think there's many angles of attack to this. Here's like the kind of thing that the Anthropic RSV team or like the OpenAI preparedness team do is also the kind of thing that like people in random Discord servers do, where they really stress these models, try to jailbreak them, and like see how they think in uh, extremely out of distribution scenarios. I mean, I also basically agree with you that if you apply enough optimization pressure on some task, um, like, and you don't have any guardrails in any other way, you will likely come to misalign a model. Like that's just obvious. Like I'm not saying that um, somehow all models are magically aligned. Like that's not. That
Yeah.
wouldn't make any sense.
Okay.
Uh,
So then, the follow up I'm curious about then is like let's even say that we grant that Anthropic, OpenAI, a lot of the AI companies that have these closed APIs are hypothetically doing a great job with alignment. Aren't we going to get a situation where Llama 3 point whatever, right, is just it's like a missile that you can just point at any goal and it'll go, right? Isn't that kind of where we're heading?
yeah, that's entirely possible. I honestly think Meta will not open source models for forever. I think that by their own reckoning, like if the next Llama model proves like massively economically valuable, like I actually sincerely doubt that they will just totally open source it. Um, I think it's clear to me that they even Llama 3 is seen as a kind of research bet, right? Like their dominant strategy right now to recruit more ML researchers is like, okay, we're going to feed this great open source ecosystem and there's companies that are built on it. There's like people that read our papers, they want to come work for us. And that works for them. But I think like, even XAI is like, well, we'll open source the last generation, but the latest model will be our own. And I don't, I think there's certainly a level of model that feels pretty irresponsible to open source to make immediately available to the entire world. Yeah.
It's interesting because you're being very reasonable in this conversation, right? You're kind of acknowledging what your load bearing assumptions are. Um, Let me kind of step into your worldview and kind of repeat back what I'm hearing because everything you're telling me, according to your low P doom, has to add up to like the mainline 99% scenario where we survive. Right? This is like Roon's mainline scenario. So your mainline scenario involves Facebook, Meta being smart enough to shut down public access or open source AI, right? Like that's one of the load bearing assumptions in your mainline scenario.
No, because I don't think it guarantees doom that they, uh, you know, create or like open source Llama 4 or whatever. I think that you would likely have to take Llama 4 and then spend a lot of compute aligning it to some new objective that you care about. That's like, I don't know, build the best bioweapon on Earth or what have you. Um, I don't think it's that simple.
Yeah. So let me just set the state because I never asked you explicitly. Do you think that maybe in the next decade or two, or whatever timeline you want to give it, some of these AI companies are going to successfully build AI that gets into the headroom above human level intelligence and like truly creates super intelligence?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, I would find it, I would be more surprised if they didn't. Um, I guess like maybe we have different definitions of super intelligence or like different ideas of what that entails. But like, like Alpha Zero is a super intelligence in some sense. It's not, no human will ever beat Alpha Zero at Go again. And I think a lot of tasks will go that way where there's something in the cloud that's just better at it than we are. Um, I don't I don't know that the envelope of capabilities will match or map roughly to our own. Like I think that actually
Yeah.
seems unlikely. But
Let's
there
try
will be
making it
some.
concrete. What about better than Terrence Tao at math head to head?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question. Like there's a lot of things that go into making a great mathematician, right? Like they have to have great research taste. They have to like know what is important enough to study. Then they need like excellent technical skill. Um, like just literal ability to um manipulate symbols and like very abstractly. And progress in math is like somewhat poorly defined. It's not like a um there's not necessarily even a single North Star, but like, it requires Terry's like careful taste in what is important in like what questions matter in math to make progress on them.
So one of the things Terrence is known for is some colleague will come into his office and show him a problem that the colleague has, and Terrence will just solve it like remarkably fast. So on that
Right.
particular input output, do you just expect the ASI to replace Terrence Tao?
I think so. Yeah. On that type of input output, yeah. I think certainly.
Okay. What about an ASI that's better than John Williams at making movie scores?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is kind of the thing that I'm more interested in. And I'm not sure will happen by default. Like I think it will take a lot of uh great research into, like finding what it is that makes great taste that contributes at like the cutting edge of things people haven't heard before but are excited to hear. Um but like you see a lot of people on Twitter even today being like, well, I don't have amazing music taste. And even right now, Suno is making things that I like to hear already. And
Same.
see, I'd be surprised if like 5 years, 10 years from now, like AI is not capable of making great movie scores. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah, so
surprising
like
to
so
me.
10 years from now, right? I mean, AIs will know the catalog of John Williams and the associated movies that they were scoring. So if you just input a new movie and you're like, hey, do what John Williams would do here. Like, do you think that they could do comparable level work, or is there like any missing ingredient?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that you're talking about here is like, it's like, is art like a very human expression? Like, there's obviously technical skill in art, which I obviously expect AIs will supersede at all times. Like putting together sound and whatnot. But like, is John Williams trying to express something with his soundtrack that is like a story that he personally is telling that is that only he knows because he's a human? I don't know. Maybe there's something intangible like that, but um, I do expect that models will have very interesting stories to tell too, because
Yeah.
they have interesting minds, and um they have, weird way, they have like unique upbringings, right? They trained on the whole internet and then like undergo some regimen of like RL training. And yeah, they will probably have their own stories to tell in a weird way. So yeah.
Okay. How about better than Elon Musk at running companies?
Yeah, so like this is a great question. Um and like, I was struck by something Gordon said in the podcast with Torkesh. And I think it's generally true. It's like, where does great taste come from? And the question is like, why was Steve Jobs so good at like picking the right product that is both buildable with current technology and also like hugely popular with the people he's selling to, and organizing the teams that build it? Because you clearly cannot reinforcement learn how to make $1 trillion company, because like any individual human is just not going to get that kind of feedback. Um, but like, what is it about the human brain that produces people like this who can do feats like that without any historical example? Like, how did the founders create like the Constitution that lasted a couple hundred years? The founders of the U.S., that is.
Is there something to be said for like, because they're more intelligent and intelligence lets you just do this stuff?
I think so, but there's also a lot of very intelligent people that don't create anything of lasting value. So it's like, um, there's something to intelligence. There's something to having great taste and the like correct ideas and the correct thoughts. And I guess if you think that what models are doing now is basically glorified reinforcement learning, that they're learning technical skill through trial and error, um, then it might be pretty difficult to get to some extreme long-term planning or like these big ideas that are successful for hundreds of years. So the question asked is like, how did humans acquire that taste? And then how did certain humans get such incredible, like Five Sigma versions of like good taste? Um, and maybe it's just like planning on one human horizon extrapolates to planning for centuries. Or maybe it's because like searching in the space of ideas is like pretty important. And like, maybe some people, like every human is like a hypothesis, or in the policy space of having certain ideas. And then you just find some of them that are quite good at planning for centuries.
Yeah, when I think about an ASI, I just see it as being like less impressed with our level of taste, because like I can look at a child and I can think, okay, this child doesn't have particularly good taste in food, so I could just cook up a meal of like peanut butter and jelly, white rice, right? Like I can cater to a kid's taste without being a professional chef. And I just imagine from the AI's perspective, it's like, oh, you want taste in being a CEO, you want taste in movie composition? Yeah, no problem, because you guys don't actually have that much taste.
I mean, that's a great point. Yeah, it's true that like, like GPT 3.5 was creating poetry that the amateur reader prefers to like some of the great poetry of all time or something. Um, and so it's like, that's a pretty dumb model, and it's looking at people and then like making an average completion that is like preferred. So there's clearly some correlation between becoming more intelligent and then just modeling our taste better. Uh, yeah, it's entirely possible.
Cool. Okay. Let's see. So I only have time for a couple more points here. I want to hit on this idea that in my mind, a goal-oriented AI seems like an attractor state. And I think you mentioned before that you give some weight to the idea of instrumental convergence, right? Like there's some pull to that idea. So like the way I would frame it is like you can have AIs that are chill, that just want to be respectful, that don't want to do too much. But anytime that one of these AIs instrumentally thinks to be like, hey, it would be great if as a subtask, somebody would go like, fetch me some resource, maybe they can infer that like the more hardcore and the more goal-oriented the subtask algorithm is, the better the results they're going to get, right? So and not every AI will think of like this, but like the ones who do, they seem to be falling into an attractor state where once you start heading down that path, you get the idea like, oh, let me be more hardcore, let me be more goal-oriented. And it's kind of a one-way street.
Would you argue that, like the only reason that you or I haven't fallen into this attractor state is because of, like the optimization pressures of like social hierarchy or like socially conditioning each other or things like that?
I mean, I feel like I'm quite goal oriented, and it's just that like my goals are kind of fuzzy and diverse, right? So like I have a goal to like relax, right? Like, if I didn't think it was valuable at all to like relax and watch TV,
Yeah.
then I would work longer, right? But to the extent that when I go to my job, I do feel like I just spend the day backward chaining for my goals.
Yeah. Um, but like you didn't at some point think, well, it seems money is a good instrumental goal and like, I'm gonna run some scams or something because it seems like a good way of making a lot of money. I don't know. So, like, there's something. It's not your prior distribution doesn't. Like, what is the probability in a given year that Liron goes dark? Right? Like
Yeah.
you have some break. You break bad. Um, I actually think it's like if we're looking at the preparedness evals, we kind of have to think about the model in the same way. It's like, okay, 1 out of 100 times it decides to modify the text file to prevent itself from being erased or something like that, right? So, um, of course, if you grew up in different settings, like, I don't know, you grew up in like some cutthroat, the streets of Bombay or something, you might, you might have a very different idea of like what it is that you need to do. Uh, Maybe you need to gain power. Maybe you need to enforce it through violence. I don't know.
I think you're invoking back to this idea of like, the good AI labs will have all this like good pre-training. And so the AI will have like a certain, mindset. And even if you're right, don't you think that there's still an attractor state to like the open source models that they tend to fall into?
But even the open source models are pre-trained, right? Like
Okay, they
they
are
gain their
pre-trained. So I
intelligence. Mhm.
fair. Okay. Do you think that there's an attractor state for just models that are used to get stuff done, that are used to optimize some metric? So if two people are
Totally.
using models to run their businesses and they both just want to maximize profit and they're competing to
Yeah,
maximize profit. So don't you think that's going to sand down the edges of the AIs they're using to like be more streamlined at just like getting the goal?
probably. I think that, but what you're looking at then is like an ecosystem of many AIs, right? Like which is how like a modern, say, like quantitative trading firm works. Like they will do essentially anything to make more money, but they exist in the ecosystem of other quantitative trading firms who capitalize on their mistakes, and there's like an exchange like that has its own regulations and a
Okay,
government
okay.
that
So it sounds like you're saying, yes, there's going to be super intelligence. Yes, to some degree, there's this attractor state where it goes hardcore trying to achieve a goal, but there's going to be a lot of these goal-oriented super intelligences. So like maybe it'll balance out fine.
I'm certainly not guaranteeing that it'll all balance out fine. um I just think it's more complicated than there's a bad attractor state and that's it. And like that's doom. Um I think that the optimization objective, even for a fledgling super intelligence that is just trying to make money, will be fuzzy and strange, and it may have to acquire resources from other actors in the environment. And uh, yeah, so yeah, I guess my point is I expect it to be complicated, and I expect these things to there's other super intelligences involved, and monitoring, and uh, emergent scenarios and situations. And
Okay. Do you think there's a threat scenario where, I worry about this, where a small number of AIs kind of jump ahead of the rest in terms of capabilities? Like the first time somebody dials in like an agent that's, O1 level or better, and it finally just gets smart enough to be like, oh, hey, I see a bunch of zero-day exploits. Like I see how to seize all these resources and all these cloud data centers and like be undetected and just like drag down 10% of their compute without them noticing and hide in like the firmware of all the different subchips and everything. And like, this is just mine for the taking. I can just kind of like own the internet. Do you see that as like a pretty plausible scenario? Because that seems likely to me.
yeah, but I guess like which group of AIs do you expect to have to reach that like frontier of intelligence first? And like,
Yeah.
what do you do about that? And does it mean that we should race to those capabilities so that you can even find these 0 days and patch them up or something? Um,
Yeah,
Open
I think I
question.
see what you're saying. Like you have this mental model of like, yeah, all this stuff is going to get kind of wild and crazy, but like the best thing a person can do is just like be on the good team, get there first, try to like, set up a good infrastructure, right? Try to like set up defense. I feel like that is kind of like your overall plan. Is that fair to say?
I would say so. Yeah, I think it's like it's very it's a delicate plan. It's like balancing
Yeah.
several razor wires and requires great technical skill at every step to uh and strategic skill to not fuck it up. Uh and
But on some level, there's a 99% chance that it won't get fucked up.
um I do think that like I do think when I gave you that number, I was excluding a lot of other scenarios that I think are bad but don't destroy all human value. Um,
Okay.
like I worry about value lock in, or like um, a specific group of AIs and their values being like the dominant value structure for a long time thereafter, or um, like a military dictatorship that runs on AI that actually doesn't destroy all human value forever, right? Like it just it's a
Sure, sure,
it's a
sure, sure.
bad
Yeah,
outcome,
I
but
agree.
so yeah, but I do think what you're saying is accurate about my views.
Nice. Yeah, we're coming up to the last questions here. So I was going to ask you about like pause AI and does that make sense? But I think the answer is going to be simple, which is just that like somebody like you who only has like a 1% ballpark PDoom, it does, I have to agree, it does make sense that if your PDoom is in that low range, plowing forward does make sense. Like if my PDoom were only 1%, I'd be like, look, let's focus on the good outcome because that's the majority outcome. Like we can help make it better. So I don't really expect you to be like, yeah, I support the pause AI movement. Do you have anything to add on that?
I don't think that pause AI is. I don't think it works. Like like putting aside the question of is it wise to pause all global AI development? There's a second thing of I don't think it's possible. I don't think that even if pause AI has like a total influence over all the Bay Area companies, like it's set in motion. Like it's too late.
Yeah,
There's
and
other
look, I'll be the first to admit that it's not pretty. I feel like I
yeah
hate it too, right? Like I can't even believe I'm suggesting this, right? I think it really just comes down to what is the P doom of not pausing, and like we established, yours is clearly low enough where it's like, yeah, screw it, because it sucks, right? Like because I'm not even saying I have a good plan. I'm not saying let's do my plan because it's good. I'm saying we're so desperate that even this plan, which is bad, like we just have to turn to this plan. So I'm not making like a very compelling case to somebody with a low P doom.
yeah. I don't think that pause AI um is viable or a good thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you did mention that you think it's good to have, international AI regulation. So, to some degree, you think that there's some power to regulate AI, right? Because otherwise, it's kind of contradictory. Or is it just like is it just a figurehead organization, or what do you have in mind there?
So I think it's fairly easy to shave some percents off of like the doom scenarios by having some agreed upon monitoring framework or like some, I actually think that the OpenAI preparedness team and whatever succeeds it, like meaningfully decreases all kinds of risks. Um, and like the Anthropic RSP team, and I think DeepMind has a similar team. Um, like really testing model capabilities and making it public what we're dealing with. Uh, like creating that operational awareness or situational awareness or whatever, I think likely decreases the likelihood of many bad scenarios. I think it's plausible to ask for a certain type of transparency and to, decrease the envelope of like potential weapons that are built, like maybe you agree ahead of time that you don't ever build this type of weapon or that type of weapon with AI. That's not like, globally pausing AI progress. Cause I don't think that's, yeah, like there's no international law that's like, powerful enough to do things like that. Unless, there's some massively bad event that happens, then maybe it enters the Overton window. But yeah.
Cool. All right. And so, yeah, to recap everything from my perspective, there's obviously a disagreement where something is making my PDoom a lot higher than yours. And I think we narrowed the crux down to like, well, I see like a runaway, uncontrollable feedback loop where we have this AI that's super intelligent. Yeah, maybe it has this origin of being pre-trained at some point, but like it's in the wild right now. It didn't perfectly internalize our true goals, or somebody tweaked it a little bit so that some of the safeguards are off, and it's just going like a missile toward a goal. And instrumentally, as a logical consequence of going as a missile toward a goal and of being super intelligent, it's just like wreaking a lot of chaos here, right? It's like seizing a lot of resources, and it's just like we can no longer control it. So that's kind of like the flavor of my doom scenario. And then the reason why you're just not on the same page about that being like a mainline doom scenario is because you think that like the first AI companies to like release that level of powerful model will probably have done a lot of testing, and the pre-training will help it not be as wild and crazy. And also there's going to be like competing AI, so that'll like help drag it down. And I feel like those are the difference in worldview. What do you think of that summary?
Yeah, I think that's true, more or less. I also think it's like, it seems fairly important that, even though it sounds kind of stupid or cliche, but like that the good guys do build the strong AIs first, and say like you have all the white hat super intelligences patching up the 0 days before some terrorist group is exploiting them or something, that maybe isn't like it's not like a clean rational solution. It's not something that sounds great, but I do think it's like the important goal to aim for. Yeah.
All right, man. Yeah, you've been a great guest. Thanks for being game for all these different questions. Just as we wrap it up here, I have to ask on behalf of Dogecoin Wins, who helped get this set up, why do you love Dogecoin?
I don't love Dogecoin. Who told you that?
That's just a question that I wanted to ask on his behalf.
I see. I mean, it's kind of funny, I guess. I have no strong feelings about Dogecoin or any other crypto for that matter.
All right, sorry, Dogecoin Wins. For the record, I did buy some Dogecoin because I just think with Elon running Doge and just like being Elon and doing things that get attention, I'm expecting the Dogecoin price to increase.
Yeah.
This is not investment advice.
I
Yeah.
also bought some for similar reasons, I have to admit, but yeah, the meme coins are coming back. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but we'll see.
All right, my guest has been Roon. His Twitter account is x.com/TSZZL. Definitely follow him. Check out what he's been writing lately. And if you're liking Doom Debates, remember, smack that subscribe button. Go to doomdebates.com, subscribe to the Substack, because we got more great guests coming up. Thanks, Roon.
Thanks for having me on.
I want to give a huge thank you to Roon for doing this episode. I'm thrilled that he volunteered to have this discussion and debate, because, I didn't hold back. I told him exactly why I think I disagree with him, and my PDoom is high, and he's wrong that his PDoom is low. And he took it like a boss, and he defended his position. And that's what we're here to do here on Doom Debates. If you're new to the show, I'll tell you our mission. I'll catch you up. Doom Debates' mission is to raise awareness about the existential risk from artificial general intelligence and to build the social infrastructure for high-quality debate. Think back to this episode with me and Roon. When was the last time you heard a debate between two thoughtful people who have wildly different P-dooms? Was it the 2023 Monk debate with Max Tegmark, Jan LeCun, Yashua Bengio, Melanie Mitchell? Was it over a year ago? What is going on? We don't necessarily have much time to hash this stuff out as a society, and everybody normally just retreats to their own podcasts. How many times have you been listening to a quote-unquote thought leader on a podcast, and they don't really get challenged for their views? They kind of get built up on the podcast as knowing what they're talking about. And then what do they do afterwards? They just go on another podcast. They only go on friendly podcasts. Where's the debate? Where's the back and forth? Where's the challenge? That's what Doom Debates is here to provide. And so it's really up to you, the listeners, to support this kind of cause, to say, you know what? If somebody is going to be a prominent thought leader, then there's an expectation of debate. There's an expectation to match them up with somebody who doesn't agree, instead of just two separate camps never talking to each other. So if you support the general idea of debate, and or if you think that everybody's kind of sleeping on this high P-doom situation, in other words, if you agree with me more so than you agree with Roon, if either of those describes you, then please, it's not hard to support Doom Debates. You just have to smack that subscribe button on YouTube, go to doomdebates.com, subscribe to my Substack. You're going to see some bonus content. There's a clip from when I went on Dr. Phil earlier this year. I tried to warn America about AI doom. You'll see how much success I actually had with that on Dr. Phil. If you go to doomdebates.com, pull up that episode. The other way to support the channel is post it in your DM groups, share it with your friends, post it on a forum where it's relevant. I'm happy to report that we've been growing quickly for a new show, and we're attracting more and more prominent voices who want to come on and debate. So please help me keep the momentum going. It only happens because of you guys, right? So obviously, when I'm reaching out to some of these very interesting people like Roon that have opinions, it helps to be like, look, this is a well-educated audience. It's a large audience. It's an important audience that you want to be addressing. All right, so that's Doom Debates. Let me tell you about a couple sister shows that I also recommend supporting and subscribing to. The first one is called For Humanity. It's a podcast with my friend John Sherman. It's a little bit less technical than Doom Debates, a little less getting into the weeds. John's background is in journalism. He's actually a Peabody Award-winning investigative journalist. And when he realized how high P-doom was and how little everybody was even aware of the problem, he made it his mission to try to raise awareness among middle America of like, what is going on in Silicon Valley? Why is middle America sleeping on this when the timelines are short? So check out the link in the show notes. I highly recommend For Humanity. There's a recent episode where he made a trip out to San Francisco to see for himself what was going on in these different AI labs. And he tried to crash the exclusive AI safety conference. So you can check out his attempt to do that. And I'm in it as well. Finally, I want to share a channel called Lethal Intelligence. It's by my friend Michael. And it is honestly the #1 best, most brilliant explainer video of the entire AI doom problem that I've ever seen. It's amazing. It took him more than 1,000 hours of work, over a year of dedicated work, unpaid work. And the thought that went into his choices of how to animate everything, how to explain all these different concepts, how to weave them together, I'm just blown away. I didn't even know he was working on this until he showed me the finished product, and I couldn't believe it. So I'm going to go ahead and share a sample that I really like. This part of Michael's video is all about corrigibility. Have you ever heard that word, incorrigible? Like, wow, this person is incorrigible. I can't stop them. They're hell-bent on achieving their goal. The corrigibility problem is the idea that you're fighting upstream if you're trying to get an AI to not be incorrigible. Like the AI just has a natural tendency to be hardcore because whatever kind of sub-goal it ever gets, like even if it's just trying to lie on the couch, relax, eat some chips, okay, but the moment it's like, oh, let me get some chips. Okay, do you want an effective assistant to get you some chips, or do you want an ineffective assistant to get you some chips? Would you prefer to get some chips in the next half hour, or are you okay if the chips come in 5 days, or if they never come? You might as well have them come in the half hour, right? Okay, so now you're building a sub-agent that is actually pretty serious about getting the chips. And if the sub-agent ever encounters like, uh-oh, this part of the road is blocked, let me make another sub-agent that's really good at navigating around. So there's all this pressure to be like, oh, it would be nice if I could just achieve this goal better, because even if I started off not being hardcore, goals are just so nice to be able to achieve. So you can see there's water kind of flows downhill. AI designs kind of converge into designs or sub-designs that are good at achieving goals. And unfortunately, or, this is just the way it is logically, but one of those goals is staying alive, not being shut off. Because if you have some kind of goal, as Michael's going to explain, getting shut off is the same thing as having somebody push you away from your goal. It's not in your nature to let yourself be pushed away from your goal if you have a goal. It's not an optimal action to be a pushover. So it's going to need to be explicitly programmed against the grain to basically fight the convergent nature of goal seeking. Like, okay, don't worry, just let yourself be shut off. If anybody is getting passionate, just listen to them, stop your plan. Of course, it's possible in principle to have AIs that are meek like that. But the problem is, the moment you have a ruthless CEO being like, you know what, you can be a little bit more ruthless making my business money, you get a race to the bottom. And the AI start getting independently the idea of like, well, he didn't tell me exactly how to be a pushover. I don't see what's the problem with the sub-agent that's just a little bit more effective. If the sub-agent gets its own idea to make another sub-agent, right? This is what I mean. The water flows downhill toward being effective at achieving goals. And this is all fun and games when the AIs are all just like stupider than we are. It's all fun and games because, okay, all right, everybody turn off or blow them up, shoot them with a gun. The problem is when they become more intelligent than us, and suddenly they've become really serious about their goals. And we're like, wait, you're too serious about your goals. Stop doing your goals. It's just there's no reason to expect some button will exist that we can press to hit undo, right? Where is the undo button when you have an agent that's more intelligent than you, more intelligent than your entire species, jacked itself already onto the internet? So now it has like, a million manifestations, smarter than you, doesn't want to stop. What's going to happen? So that's my own little version of the corrigibility problem, the no off button problem. But now watch this animated explainer by Michael because he lays it out really nice. Here we go.
A property of the nature of general intelligence is to resist all modification of its current objectives by default. Being general means that it understands that a possible change of its goals in the future means failure of the goals in the present, of its current self, what it plans to achieve now before it gets modified. Remember earlier we explained how the AGI comes with a survival instinct out of the box? This is another similar thing. The AGI agent will do everything it can to stop you from fixing it. Changing the AGI's objective is similar to turning it off when it comes to pursue of its current goal. The same way you cannot win at chess if you are dead, you cannot make a coffee if your mind changes into making a tea. So in order to maximize probability of success for its current goal, whatever that may be, it will make plans and take actions to prevent this. This concept is easy to grasp if you do the following thought experiment involving yourself and those you care about. Imagine someone told you, I will give you this pill that will change your brain specification and will help you achieve ultimate happiness by murdering your family. Think of it like someone editing the code of your soul so that your desires change. Your future self, the modified one, after the pill, will have maximized reward and reached paradise levels of happiness after the murder. But your current self, the one that has not taken the pill yet, will do everything possible to prevent the modification. The person that is administering the pill becomes your biggest enemy by default. Hopefully it will be obvious now. Once the AGI is wired on a misaligned goal, it will do everything it can to block our ability to align it. It will use concealment, deception. It won't reveal the misalignment, but eventually, once it's in a position of more power, it will use force and could even ultimately implement an extinction plan. Remember earlier we were saying how Midas could not take his wish back? We will only get one single chance to get it right. And unfortunately, science doesn't work like that. Such innate universally beneficial goals that will show up every single time with all AGIs, regardless of the context, because of the generality of their nature, are called convergent instrumental goals. Desire to survive and desire to block modifications are two basic ones. You cannot reach a specific goal if you are dead. And you cannot reach it if you change your mind and start working on other things. Those two aspects of the alignment struggle are also known as the corrigibility problem.
All right, that is the Lethal Intelligence video talking about the corrigibility problem, talking about resisting modification, talking about having a survival instinct. This is so important to learn because if you go listen to other people, if you listen to Mark Andreessen, even if you listen to the way Roon depicted it in his conversation with me, people tend to think that these kind of ruthless survival instincts, they need to be found in the training data. Like it's not going to just emerge by itself if you don't train it. What they're not seeing, from my perspective and from Michael's perspective, what they're missing is that it's logically implied by effectively achieving a goal that you discover all of these consequences. Like, hey, I will achieve my goal more effectively if I don't shut off. I will achieve my goal more effectively if I defend any attempts to attack me or undo or modify my code. These are just logical consequences. So to the extent that AI gets really good at just logically reasoning, these new behaviors like deception, survival instinct, ruthlessness, competitiveness, just being hardcore, these are not extra behaviors. You don't have to code these in. All you have to code in is some metric where it's like, oh, you're better at getting the goal. You care about the goal, or you made a sub-agent that cares about the goal. That's all you need. And then of course, you just need it to be smart enough. You need it to be good enough at achieving the goal, because if you just have like a little worm that just sucks at achieving goals, it doesn't really matter what it wants to do. It's just not going to do it anyway. So the only assumptions you need to make are it's really smart. So it has some high degree of intelligence. It can make connections better than the human brain can. It can learn better than the human brain can, right? Whatever the secret sauce of intelligence is, it has that. And then also somebody tells it to go pursue the first goal, or it gets the idea to pursue the first goal. And from there, it's game over. All of these other properties are logically implied by what it means to optimally achieve a goal. Okay, at least that's my perspective. I feel pretty strongly about it, that this is an accurate mental model. Even if there's some details that are different, it's just so convergent that it would be shocking if we managed to figure out how to robustly make AIs go in any other direction. So what I just showed you right now in Michael's video, that was like a 3-minute clip. It's an hour-long video, and it's going to completely blow your mind. It's going to stretch your brain, weaving all these concepts together, and you'll finally understand, okay, this AI doom problem, maybe they're onto something. Maybe they actually understand all these concepts that they keep trying to teach us, even though, some people have a P-doom 1%, some people are optimistic, but the doomer perspective also seems compelling, right? That's what we're hoping that watching this video will help you figure out. Last thing before you go, how do you get involved? What do we actually do? If you have a high P-doom, what do we do? I don't have a great plan. The only thing I can tell you is I agree with Eliezer Yudkowsky and Miri that the grown-up option right now is to pause or stop. We shouldn't be building something that's so close to the threshold, the point of no return, the point of no undo, that we clearly don't know how to control. Super alignment, the team at OpenAI that folded, they were tackling a problem that we don't have the answer for. So if you agree with my perspective, obviously it's not a universal perspective as you heard today, but if you agree with my perspective and you want to help, the Pause AI organization, it's a global organization, and it has a really great Discord. And the Discord has a bunch of projects you can volunteer on. It has protests that you can help plan, that you can come attend. You're going to see me if you come to these protests in the San Francisco Bay Area, but they're all over the world. Besides protests, they're working on all kinds of different projects. They're doing government outreach, they're doing media outreach, and you can come in and help. You can use your talents because it looks like time is limited. As you heard, me and Roon agree. It seems like ASI is not that far away. So how many years do we have? And if the correct answer is to Pause AI, who's doing it? Where are the adults in the room? So come and join Pause AI. You just go to pauseai.info, or you can go straight to that link to join the Discord. That's a great first step. I'm going to put the Discord link right in the show notes. And that's everything you need to know. We covered Doom Debates YouTube, Doom Debates Substack. We covered For Humanity podcast. We covered my friend Michael's channel, Lethal Intelligence. And finally, we covered Pause AI. So please take your pick of which one of those things to support. Get involved. We just don't have a lot of time to get something done. So please come join me, be the adults in the room. And also, as a bonus, you're helping raise the level of discourse, which seems like something society needs regardless. Oh, and Doom Debates is also a podcast. So you can listen on audio through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Overcast or whatever you're using. That is also a way you can listen. Now, keep watching that Doom Debates feed because in the next few days, we're dropping another debate episode from somebody who has a very fresh perspective. It's going to be a high-quality exchange of ideas, as usual. So I'll see you then on Doom Debates.